There's a slight irony to this next story because it is by Cary Tennis, Salon.com's advice columnist, who specifically gave it to us because he is planning to, well, I have to do what the sign says, because he's planning to do it as part of a one-man show and wanted to see how someone else would interpret it and take notes and learn something, and then he can't be here tonight. So, that irony aside, however, it will be carefully read by Jimmey Cross, one of our favorites. So, ladies and gentlemen, Cary Tennis, Jimmey Cross, performing The Secret World of Dad. The Secret World of Dad. Jimmey Cross!
There we go. All right. Microphones. I made it, so now I have to use it. All right. It's customary in situations like this to warm the audience up with a joke or two. I just thought I'd say that. There are no jokes. Actually, that was a joke right there. It wasn't a funny joke. That's what people don't get about my humor. People are so mean. So I just want to say, I hate it when performers come up on stage and ask the audience to do things. Like when somebody says, "Everybody put your hands together." I don't put my hands together. I look at my hands and go, "Hey guys, we're beating the system." So I'm not going to ask you to turn to the person to your left and shake their hand or anything creepy like that. I'm going to ask you to do one thing quietly in your own mind while you're sitting there safely in your seat. And you can do it or not do it because I will never know. What I'm going to ask you to do is just to imagine being 15 or maybe 16 or 14, a young teenager, and you're in the suburbs. And as a kid, you've gotten along pretty much okay so far. You've gotten through elementary school and you have sort of figured out the basics of living as a kid. And it's not ideal, but it's sort of manageable. And say you're 15 and it's 1968, say, and though you're still in most ways a kid, things have accelerated lately in your kid's world because your house has become the hippie house, and your brother has come home with pot, and you've been initiated into the mysteries of the hippie world. So I'll stop saying you, I'll say me. So somehow my house became the hippie house on Rainbow Drive in Hollywood Hills, Florida, when I was in the 9th grade. So just if you will imagine that, and imagine it being 1968, and basically everything outside our world seems to be falling apart. And we live day to day, not knowing if the atom bomb is going to fall, or if my brother is going off to Vietnam, or my parents are going to become swingers, or anything could happen in our strangely quiet little suburb home of Hollywood Hills, Florida. So my dad sits up late at night reading the paper while my mom is in the bedroom, and they aren't talking, and it seems like he's been thrown out of the bedroom, and they've been fighting, and he won't tell about what, and he's sitting in the chair in the living room reading under a floor lamp with the newspaper open in front of him, his legs crossed, his strange, shiny brown leather bedroom slipper dangling from his foot, his bare foot, which I've always found ugly and disturbing, the bare feet of your father, somehow disturbing. And he wears an abstracted scowl, and he stares at the newspaper every now and again saying, But no more. As we hippie kids come in and out, our girlfriends in tow, greeting my dad, "Good evening, Mr. Tennis," so extremely polite, and he rising to shake hands or just a half rise and doffing an imaginary hat, an exaggerated politeness to the ladies, our girlfriends in their tight shorts and their t-shirts knotted in Florida heat, and their Zoris on their beautiful bare brown feet, girls named Eve and Lori and Mary and Alexandra, and guys named Larry and Mark and Rudy and Mike, all of us in and out of the house all day and night, in and out of cars parked in front and in and out of my brother's van, sitting on the lawn out front smoking pot, playing guitars, along with numerous bedraggled stragglers picked up off the beach highway and shared weed with and brought home to sleep for a few nights on the floor before heading back to Detroit or Cleveland or Pittsburgh or Philly, and my mom coming out of the bedroom red-eyed and crying about what we do not know, and getting her brown mug of soy milk and her hardtack and peanut butter or just butter or her honey and apple and her rice cakes and her honey and her fruit with a fruit knife and a paper towel, her nibbling in the evenings alone in a room with Agatha Christie novels, her reading glasses, and sometimes her typewriter, or my father's typewriter going, the sound of wild, unstoppable hopes, the sound of my father's dreams, his screenplays ideas, his short story ideas, his copious ideas spilling out onto page after page, and going into envelopes off to Argosy or Hustler or Playboy or literary journals related to the UFO journals and the journals of extrasensory perception, the cult's crazy stuff he got into later. But I'm standing on the terrazzo in the doorway of our split-level house on Rainbow Drive with my brother's VW van out front, my brother sitting inside the curtained rear part of the van with his girlfriend and his pot, and Larry and his guitar, drinking beer and smoking pot, and drinking beer and smoking pot, and drinking beer, smoking pot, and my dad peering over the edge of the newspaper every half hour or so to see what we were doing, or if we're still there. And my dad puts down the newspaper and rubs his eyes and says to me like a man awakening from a dream, "Let's go for a ride." And he says it in his John Wayne voice that I haven't heard from him in a long time. He's quiet, thoughtful man, given to occasional eruptions of anger. You can tell he's angry because he will use that voice and then he will say, "Damn it." So he repeats it. He says, "Let's go for a ride, damn it." He throws down the newspaper on the floor and I'm just standing there, frozen. He's been reading the latest news about the war in Vietnam and he knows that my brother, his son, has refused induction and is fighting the draft, and he is of two minds about it because he knows it's a terrible and stupid war, but he's also a proud Navy officer, and he sort of believes in the idiocy of his own class. So he's been sitting there night after night, watching us drift in and out, high on pot, sometimes on acid, drinking beer and playing Grateful Dead songs on the guitar, and I can sense in all his anger, all those weeks of watching us, baffled and outraged and trying to make sense of it as he puts down the newspaper, using his lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy voice, "Let's go for a ride, damn it." And I just go into obedient son mode and get in the car with him, and we take a drive in the early evening. It's not dark yet. There's still some rush hour traffic, but we drive down the freeway and I'm asking, "Where are we going?" And he's all, "You'll see." And we drive into this apartment complex a few miles down the freeway towards Hallandale. And he says, "Come on." And we go up these concrete and steel steps into the balcony and down the hall to an apartment door, and he knocks on the door, and this slight dark-haired woman in a robe opens the door, and she says, "Mel, hello." And she looks at me, and I look at her, and he says, "This is my son." "Mel? Daddy? Do you have a girlfriend? Is this your girlfriend?" "Mel, why did you bring him here?" "Yes, Daddy, why did you bring me here?" "I'm sick and tired of lying," he says in that angry voice. "I want him to know." "Do you have a girlfriend, Daddy?" "Does Joan know?" she says. That's my mom's name. "Does Mummy know?" I say. We call her Mummy. "I'm just sick and tired of lying," he says. And my dad starts to cry there in the doorway. And so Katrina brings us inside. It's kind of a hippie-ish apartment with African masks and drums and lots of books and rugs on the floor and a guitar. I pick up the guitar and I sit on her futon. "I hear you play the guitar," she says. "He plays brilliantly," my dad says. "Here, play her something." So I play this classical piece I've been learning, and I look at my dad, and he has this empty, tormented look on his face. And that these days we would call needy, but back then we didn't call people needy. We didn't use that psychological lingo. We just called it pathetic and creepy, but touching too. I've never seen my dad like this. And Katrina is sort of unbelievably worldly, and she has this very soft voice, and she's pretty in a strange bohemian dad's girlfriend kind of way, which is to say is also kind of creepy in that I would be thinking she's hot, but I can see that for my dad she's incredibly hot. But she's keeping him distant with some kind of adult girlfriend force field, just shooting him these glances. "So is this like your secret love nest?" I say, and I'm immediately sorry because I didn't mean it hurtful, but Katrina looks hurt. "I don't mean it like that. I didn't know." And then Katrina says to me, "Let's take a ride." And I look at my dad, and he's like, "Okay." So then I'm following my dad's girlfriend out the apartment door, and we leave, and my dad there, and I get in Katrina's little MG with the top up, and she drives to 7-Eleven, and we stop, and she pulls up the emergency brake, and she turns to me and says, "I can't believe he did that." "Pleased to meet you," I say. I'm better with her when it's just us two. I can be a little charming. "I didn't know my dad had a girlfriend." "I thought he had told you about me," she says. "Well, he said something vague and weird and kind of undecipherable last week. We were in the backyard, but he's kind of hard to decipher." She doesn't say anything. "I mean, he's a strange guy, my dad, right?" "I think he is a brilliant and misunderstood and lonely," she says. "Wow." I say, "Wow." I wouldn't have asked him to bring you here. I don't know what he was thinking," she says. "I can see what she was thinking," I say. "Our life is hell. He sits there in the living room with his paper night after night. We all have our girlfriends. It's not good. He is a brilliant and sensitive man, your father," she says, "and he is very unhappy." So then I just feel miserable. Why did she have to tell me that? And then I'm crying. I can't help it. I'm sitting in her nice MG with the top up, crying outside the 7-Eleven in Pembroke Pines. She goes in and buys some wine and cigarettes. And when she comes back, I say, "I ought to get going. My friends are at the house." She looks at me with this awful tender, sad look, and it makes me so want to punch her then. It's so possessive and intimate and kind. I don't know, it makes me angry. Maybe she sees the anger in my face and she lets off the parking brake and we roll down, and then she starts the MG and we drive back to the apartment, and my dad is waiting on the balcony outside the door, and there's a man with him. That's my brother Tom, she says. Tom, this is Mel's son. We've met, he says. Sure, he's my dad's friend. We've met. So my dad is sleeping with his sister of his best friend. Cozy. So now that this friend Tom is there, my dad doesn't want me to drive home, so Tom says, hey, come on in, let's have some Mateus Rose. They take a bottle of Mateus Rose, and I'm supposed to be thrilled they're treating me like an adult and offering me some Mateus Rose, so I figure we're being adults and hip here, and I'm the token hippie now, so I say, anybody want to smoke some grass? And Tom looks at my dad, and Katrina looks at my dad, and my dad looks at me and shrugs. Okay, he says, like it's a dare. So I take out the little bud that I have in my pants pocket and some rolling papers, and I begin rolling a joint for them. I roll the joint and I lick the papers sitting there on the floor in Katrina's apartment. I'm a very good roller of joints by this point, and I take pride in it. I have never rolled a joint in front of my father before. Rolling a joint in front of my father could be like the title of a poem I would write if I wanted to write a poem about how the universe suddenly shifted on its axis. Rolling a joint in front of my father feels like doing some impossible somersault I didn't know I could do, like in a dream where I have superpowers and he sits there watching me roll it. And then we have a moment, and he's watching me not with disapproval but with pride. And I see my dad, who has been so miserable and angry for weeks now, unapproachable, touchy, enclosed, off in his angry, slouching world of silent newspaper reading, growing more remote and more angry and more scary, but saying nothing, just seething behind his newspaper. And he's suddenly exploded, and now the world has changed, and I'm sitting barefoot in his girlfriend's apartment rolling a joint for him and his best friend. I roll it and I hand it to Tom, not to Katrina, because I've tried to be gallant and hand things to women first, but have observed in my 15-year-old way that when handed a joint, a woman will look at it as if she's never seen one before and wait for a man to produce a lighter. So I hand it to Tom, and he hands it to my dad, and my dad hands it to Katrina like it's some archaeological specimen. She hands it back to me, so I light it and draw in a hit and hand it to Katrina. And Katrina smokes it. This blows my mind. I'm smoking pot with my dad's girlfriend. I can't believe it. Nobody is ever going to believe this. And she hands it to Mel, and he to Tom, and then Katrina puts on this fast Greek music in her little portable stereo, and then she's up dancing in the middle of a circle, and we're sitting on the floor, and now my father's girlfriend is dancing around us. She's Greek. They're both Greek. And she's doing a modified belly dance in her Greek long skirt, beaded sheer top, and she hands me the joint and takes my dad's hand and pulls him up, and then he's dancing with her, and they're dancing to Greek music. Then I take a hit, and she pulls Tom up by the hand, and Tom is dancing, and then she pulls me up by the hand, and it's kind of creepy, but it's also kind of wonderful, and then I'm up too, and we're all dancing in my dad's girlfriend's apartment to Greek music. And the sun is starting to set now, and twilight brings out all the colors in the tropical sky, out towards the Everglades, and past the freeway and beyond, and the sun is setting and the birds are singing and winging south, and we are dancing, high on pot, to Greek music in my dad's girlfriend's apartment.
I'll tell Cary that worked.